The number one thing, the very best thing that you can do is to get yourself around healthy people. Everybody's heard this statement by now, you're the average of the 5 people that are closest to you. I always like to support everything I say with science, but Princeton University did an interesting study. And they had individuals get together and create rapport, just basic little small talk conversation. And within just a couple of minutes, their brain waves synced up. The frequency at which their brains were moving literally started to match. That happens all the time. You're syncing up with the people around you. The number one thing you can do to transform your health is to get yourself around healthy people. Get yourself in the environment, because it's very difficult to go to McDonald's if you're with a healthy person. You guys are like out, just came from the gym, and they're on their way to Whole Foods or whatever. You're like, can you stop and grab me a McRib? It's like highly unlikely that you'll do that, just from a logical sense. But from this kind of even metaphysical, deeper level, you really are a product of your environment. And the great thing about humans is that we're not just a product of our environment, we're a creator of our environment. So you can consciously choose that, and that's what's gonna help you to take your things to another level.
Need motivation?
Watch a Top 10 with Believe Nation.
Hey, it's Evan Carmichael, and I make these videos because in my first business, I quit on my business partner. I was making $300 a month, and I didn't have the motivation to keep going. And the thing that got me through was studying the stories of entrepreneurs who've had massive success. And I hope that in sharing these stories with you, you find the motivation to keep going. And if I'm being honest, I still need the stories for myself today too. So today, let's learn from one of the best, Shawn Stevenson, and my take on his top 10 rules of success. Enjoy. Rule number 2, improve your sleep.
What it really boils down to, if you're getting 8 hours of sleep, for me, I liken sleep minutes to calories. Like today, most people are well aware that it's not just the quantity of calories, it's the quality of those calories. For same thing, it's the quality of those sleep minutes, not just the quantity, right? So you can get if you're looking at, what did I mention earlier? A chocodile, right? Versus wild caught salmon or Lewis's salad. Is there a name of the salad?
I should call it
Lewis's
the Great Salad or something. Because it's a custom bowl. It's the Greatness Bowl.
Yes, the salad of greatness.
Yes.
So a chocodile versus the salad of greatness, it's gonna have wildly different impact on what it does to your metabolism, right? And so the same thing with your sleep minutes. You can be getting 8 hours of chocodile sleep because of your blue light exposure, because of you not tapping into thermal regulation, because you having issues with blood sugar regulation, and list goes on and on and on, some of the things we talked about. Or you can get an incredible optimized version of that sleep that only takes you 6.5 hours, where you're going through your sleep cycles efficiently and you're waking up feeling like a beast, right? The answer is it depends. The quality of your sleep and who you are and what you're doing right now. Because there are times in your life when you've had to sleep more, right? If you're somebody's training for whatever, your body just needs a little bit more sleep. Maybe you're under a lot of stress, whatever the case might be, it's gonna change. And we have to honor our bodies. Obviously, I'm a big fan of routine because your body's always looking for routine. But when you're up, life is dynamic, things are gonna happen. And so I allow myself to change my sleep schedule a little bit, and I try to stay within a nice framework. But if something's going on, and I know that I'm stressed, man, I really need to back off. I need to recover. I don't need to push it down more. And this also just comes with experience too. You know what I mean? So that I can wake up recovered and get back on my grind. You know what I mean? And so, but just a little quick thing that I want to share with people, that's another big buy-in point, is that our sleep quality affects our appearance, right? Specifically, nobody's waking up I just want to be super ugly today. As ugly as possible, you know what I mean? I want to scare children, you know what I mean? And there was this really cool study that was done recently. So this was just in 2017. And the Swedish researchers, and what they did was they had study participants take a picture after a full night of good sleep. And then they had them take a picture after sleep depriving them, where they're getting about 5 to 6 hours of sleep for 2 days. All right, so they sleep deprive them for 2 days, take their picture again. There's a mixture of pictures that these raters, the people who were rating all the people's beauty, and what they did was they looked at all the different pictures, and this is looking at what's happening in our brains, just again through evolutionary biology. When we see people, we get feedback. And what the scientists were wanting to do was to find out, does sleep deprivation cause a hesitance to want to be around somebody? All right? And so what the raters found was that when people were sleep deprived, they were deemed to be less attractive, they were deemed to be less healthy, and they also decided like I would be less interested in socializing with this person, okay? Wow. Just in 2 days of sleep deprivation. And another study by Swedish researchers found that just 5 days of sleep deprivation, just getting less than 6 hours of sleep, led to 45% increase in fine lines and wrinkles in the face. It aged you very quickly. But the good news is it reverses, not as quickly.
It rebounds.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's called beauty sleep. Why don't we talk about this more?
It's true.
You know what I mean? It's called beauty
true.
sleep for a reason. There's real rejuvenative magic in this.
In sleeping.
You know what I mean? And so looking at how we feel about other people and how we're showing up in the world, like your sleep has a big impact on that.
Rule number 3, prevent brain inflammation.
Obesity in and of itself is increasing the rate of inflammation. So right now in the United States, we're knocking on the door of 250 million of our citizens being overweight or obese, right? It's beyond epidemic. It's insane. Rest assured, if we're venturing into obesity, your brain is suffering because of it. And I also noted another study where we're seeing this correlation. I talked to Daniel Amen, who wrote the...
Yeah, I love Daniel Amen. He's been on the podcast twice.
Yeah, I love him so much.
Yeah, he's awesome.
But he's accumulated so much data. But there's also some peer-reviewed studies as well, looking at once our waist size is increasing, it's correlated with a decrease in our brain size. So as our waist circumference goes up, our brain size goes down, the volume of our brain, which is not good at all. And so there's this huge connection with these two. But also what's driving this inflammation is the foods that we're eating, obviously, as well. And obesity itself, but just to give a little snapshot, like how does that work? How's obesity creating more inflammation? Our fat cells are pretty damn amazing. If without our fat cells being as intelligent as they are, we wouldn't have made it as humanity. It enabled us to go through times of famine and still survive. But here's the thing, we live in a very different time now where more people are dying from excess than from deprivation, right? And so during this time of excess, our fat cells can actually grow 1,000 times their size, right? It gets crazy. They're like,
wow.
I don't want to disrespect them by calling them little trash cans, but they're kind of like these internal trash cans that can...
They keep collecting.
Yeah, it's like these hefty cinch sacks, like really good trash bags that are filling up. And as that happens, it's sending out a distress signal because the fat cells were never made to contain that much stored energy. And so it's sending out a kind of a false distress signal to your immune system, thinking that you're infected. Your fat cells are chronically infected. This is why we see epidemic levels of inflammation measured by things like C-reactive protein in folks as we venture into obesity. So the fat cells themselves are a big contributor to inflammation. But to lean into food a little bit, one of the biggest culprits that's being highlighted today, and with any of the stuff I talk about, Jay, there's always conflicting information.
Of course. Yeah, I get that.
And the average person doesn't, though. It's just like, this is the end all be all. What I do is, I'm a research scientist primarily. I'll go and proactively look for things that rebuke what I believe, that prove what I'm saying otherwise or other than. And it takes a lot of courage to go and look for things to prove you wrong.
Yeah.
But what I'll do is I'll look at the variety of information and what does the majority of data that we have say. That's a better place for us to stand on and educate from, right? But one of the biggest culprits, and this is what the majority of data says, is these highly refined, oxidized seed oils that have become so prevalent in our food system. And again, I get to work with the best people in the world on these subjects, like Dr. Kate Shanahan. She's really a pioneering voice in this field. And she worked with the Lakers and helped with Kobe Bryant, got him on these protocols, extending his career, all these great things. And so she has that fame and credibility there, but she's also a brilliant scientist and somebody who's very versed in metabolism. But one of the things that she shared with me was that this particular study, which was crazy, they looked at the biopsies, right? So you can actually go and look inside of what a fat cell contains back in the earlier part of the 1900s and saw what is the makeup of the average person's fat cell. And about 2% of our fat cells back then were made of these polyunsaturated fatty acids, or PUFAs, right? Today, the amount of polyunsaturated fatty acids that make up the average person's fat cell is up to 25 or even 30%. So it went from 2% to 25%. So literally the ingredients that make us as a species has changed dramatically. And what is it about these particular fats? Like how is so much of it making up the ingredients that make us up? And it's because they're in everything. They're very cheap. They're rancid, oxidized oil. They have no choice but to be those things. Like getting the oil from corn, like there's so little. And if people saw the process, which I highly encourage people to do, there's lots of videos. You could see the processing of canola oil or quote, vegetable oil. I remember when my mom started using vegetable oil trying to get healthy. Because my family, again, I was the skinny kid in the family. Pretty much everybody else in my family, at least about 80% of folks were obese. And so she started using vegetable oil. It sounds healthy, but it's not asparagus oil or broccoli oil. These are highly refined seed oils, corn oil, soy oil, canola oil. And to extract those oils, it kind of looks like just mud. It just looks disgusting. It looks like this, kind of like almost like gasoline type vibe to it. And it has to use bleaching agents and deodorizers. And I cited a study in my book, and this was published in the journal Inhalation Toxicology. And they found that just smelling those oils while cooking can damage your DNA. Right?
Wow.
Crazy stuff, right?
Just smelling.
Just inhaling the fumes from it.
Let alone actually putting it in your body.
Yes. So it's crazy. It's so crazy. And so for me, it's just looking like this specific component, your body has to go into this kind of pro-inflammatory state to try to manage any insult. Inflammation is one of the most important things for our survival. It's kind of been given a bad name right now because we're dealing with chronic inflammation, but we need inflammation in order to just heal for stuff you don't even know is going on. There are cells right now in your body that are dying off and recycling. There's always an inflammatory component, catabolic component, and that's okay. But once we venture into chronic inflammation where these things are getting out of hand, that's where we start to see all manner of things go wrong.
Rule number 4, keep moving.
And so exercise is really about two main things. Number one is assimilation. And I came across some research that showed that when you actually are doing walking while taking on specific supplements for your bones, your bone density goes even higher, all right? Because that walking helps your body to assimilate. Number two is elimination, elimination of toxins. Because your lymphatic system, which, especially when you're getting healthier, your body is trading out a lot of stuff. And there's a lot of dead cells, there's a lot of metabolic waste products. And so how do you get that stuff out of your system? You have to move because your lymphatic system doesn't have a pump like your cardiovascular system does. And you actually have 4 times more lymph than you do blood. And so that movement was so important in healing. And here's the problem is that oftentimes when you have, an injury or an issue like this, we're told not to do anything. That's often the worst thing you can do because things will start to atrophy. If you don't use it, you lose it. And so I just started to, and it's, of course, if anybody's dealing with like an acute problem right now, like take a day or two off, but I encourage people to do what you can in an intelligent way. And so for me, I could barely walk properly. And so I started off on a stationary bike, progressed to treadmill. I started jogging a little bit. Eventually I picked up the weights again. And, just to jump really quickly to the end of the story, I had lost 28 pounds in the next 6 weeks.
Wow.
And the pain I've been experiencing for 2.5 years was gone.
Also, to make sure you're actually taking action after watching this video, I've designed a special free worksheet just for this video. The worksheet will highlight all of the lessons learned in this video, as well as pull out our 3 favorite learnings and quotes that will inspire you to actually do something. The worksheet will also give you space to write down what your key takeaways are and your specific plan of action to make sure you're getting results. If you want the worksheet designed specifically for this video, absolutely for free, there's a link in the description below. Go click on it and start building the momentum in your life and your business. I'll see you there. Rule number 5, reboot your metabolism.
For everyone listening, it should always be, what is the thing, right? So when we hear these terms like metabolism, we often have a certain association with it.
That's my point. Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And so it's usually going to be tied to weight loss. And it's a huge mistake because metabolism is really everything. There's a whole field of immunometabolism. Your immune system has its own metabolism where it's building new immune cells, where it's functioning at a certain level, where there's cellular waste products, and the list goes on and on. All these things are metabolism. So life itself is driven by metabolism, but this is a huge mistake even in the weight loss domain when we're just thinking about food and nutrition and diet in terms of changing our metabolism. And this is why with the book, I gave people what they want, which again, that's the on-ramp, right? But food controls so much more than just our metabolism. It also controls our cognitive function. Our emotional intelligence is highly influenced by our nutrition. And that's one of the main things I wanted to talk with you about as well. And also it affects our relationships and how we relate to other people. The list goes on and on. Food isn't just food, it's information, you know? And so as far as the metabolism side is concerned, what I wanted to do was break down how the process of metabolism actually works. How does weight loss work, right? How does fat loss work? Where does fat go? Like when I quote lose weight, where the hell does the weight go? You know what I mean? So I'm taking people through that process. And I use analogies to make it make sense, because one of the things I learned from Tony was one of the fastest ways of learning, which I was doing this, but I didn't realize it, is take something that you don't know and connect it to something that you do know, right? And so I use this analogy of going to the movies and using it as a cellular movie theater and how the process of fat loss actually works. And so we've got these key ushers that are making things happen. You know, you come into the movie theater and you've got these specific enzymes. So we've got hormone-sensitive lipase, for example. And hormone-sensitive lipase is the enzyme required to actually open up your cells so that it releases stored energy and, you know, triglycerides, stored fat to be used for fuel. Nothing's happening without this usher. All right, so that's required. Then we've got another usher who's putting fat in the seats, right? Lipoprotein lipase, right? And so, but then we've got the managers of the ushers, which are insulin and glucagon, which there's so much more, but I'm just giving a little snapshot.
Rule number 6, eliminate bad habits.
Once we change our habits and our practices, you can do things to start to reverse that aging process in some aspects, right? By lengthening those telomeres, by doing good things for your body, which includes getting more sleep. So you burning the candle at both ends or burning the telomeres at both ends, you can reverse that process. Okay. That's the good news.
That's good.
Now, in the context of sleep debt, so if you're just sleep deprived for, you know, just say you're going like months at a time, getting, you know, 4 whatever hours, your incidence of heart disease is skyrocketing, heart attack, stroke, diabetes, all this stuff is going up. Chances are you're not going to make it very far. Some people, even people listening, are like, well, I'm fine. You got to be careful about that. Now, that sleep debt is a lot to pay back. If it's like a day or two, maybe 3-4 days at the most, and you kind of catch up, you know, maybe on the weekend, that can be helpful. But it's still like you're not getting back as much as you're taking out, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So the best strategy is to get high quality, for the keywords, high quality sleep more consistently. And then if something happens where it throws you off, like, you know, you go out, whatever, you know, like you got an event for a couple of days, all good. But guess what? You're going to probably be pretty destroyed and you're going to want to sleep more and recover.
Yeah, of course.
You know what I mean? But if you're constantly dipping into that bank account, you can't readily pay it back as much as we think.
Rule number 7, get enough nutrients.
Now we know today that when your body is hungry, when you're calling out, when you're not a normal hunger, but like a chronic state of hunger and cravings, something is wrong. And a big walkaway point for everybody today is that chronic nutrient deficiency leads to chronic hunger. Chronic nutrient deficiency leads to chronic cravings. Chronic nutrient deficiency leads to chronic weight problems. And this is what we know today. So that was the root of it. And
that's
today,
one of the most powerful things I've ever heard, Shawn, right? What you just said. Ever heard is that is an indicator of a nutritional deficiency you're saying in your body when you're having these cravings. It's your body saying, I need something?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We evolved having something called post-ingestive feedback. All right, post-ingestive feedback. So through our evolution, whenever we eat a food, your body is like internally like taking notes. It's like breaking out a sticky note and like writing, you know, maybe you just ate a particular food and it's like, oh, I just picked up some boron, I picked up some copper, I picked up some lysine, I picked up some magnesium. And it associates flavors are basically like food labels. And so we talk about the science of flavor in the book as well. Yeah. And so in a normal circumstance, our bodies have a relationship with the food that we eat to get the nutrients that we want. But today, food manufacturers have hijacked that machinery. And so we might eat, you know, whatever, a sandwich, processed food sandwich, you know, we go and hit up Subway and we might eat that food, But then our body is craving. We have the hunger because we need magnesium. We're deficient in copper. We're deficient in amino acids. And then in comes a particular food that we eat. And for me, I'm going to use the example that I'm actually thinking about. Yeah. For myself, like once a week, I would go to 7-Eleven and I would get a nacho with chili and cheese. And it's already a problem when you got to pump your chili out of a pump. I mean, just that whole reality is twisted, you know? Yeah. And so my body is crying out. It's creating this hunger because I'm deficient in all these nutrients. Omega-3 fatty acids, like we talked about earlier, your body will signal you. And through our evolution, your biology would know which foods to go and target. But now I'm hungry. All I know is I'm hungry, and I go and throw this in, and I might have something in my belly, but I'm hungry again soon after. Yes. Right? I'm never really satisfying that hunger because I'm not giving my body the raw materials it's calling for.
Rule number 8, allow others to speak.
This is a tenet throughout history. The number one thing for me is to know thyself. You know, really do a self-assessment, because oftentimes, you know, working as somebody I'm sitting across the table from a person and they've got 12 medications that they're on and they're wanting to make a change. And I have to be there and to look them in the eyes and say, I got you. We're going to figure this out. And actually know with every fiber of my being that we're going to figure it out.
Yeah.
To be able to do that, I have to evoke within that person and find what is a leverage point and help them to get honest about what landed them in this place that they're in to begin with, right? So what I would find is that, and this is a great secret for all the coaches out there, many people already probably know this who are doing this type of work. If you allow a person to speak, just ask them questions. They will often tell you the cause and the cure of what is ailing them. They know it already. It's already within their mental and, you know, cellular records. They know better than anybody, right? But you have to give people space to be able to speak. And so, but oftentimes coaches, you know, we want to help people. And so we just want to give them our thing, right? But just actually be there, listen, be a space for this person who's probably nobody's ever really listened to them. Like just actually shut everything down and listen to them, be that person. And they'll tell you the cause and cure. So know thyself is the tenet, self-assess. And there's different personality types that we can put people in, but we're infinite, you know, we really are. But there are people who tend to be people who start things and stop things very quickly. You right? They meet a little bit of resistance and that's okay. Then there are people who, you know, swing for the fences. They go and they do so much. Like they get all the things, they get all the equipment, they go so hard and they run themselves into the ground, right? And there are people who are just more balanced. Like there's different personality types. Yeah. And so really honing in on what your personality types are. And I talked about this a little bit in the book as well. So know thyself so you know what to shore up. And I don't like to talk in terms of strengths and weaknesses. You know, you have strengths and then you often have things that are foreign to you, right? And that's okay, because like my strength is I know a lot about the human body. I don't know about cars. You know what I mean? Like I know Danica Patrick, like I feel disrespected even saying car around her. You know what I'm saying? And so it's just like being able to understand like that's not my domain of excellence but I could learn. I might, you know, because of my experience come into the car game and like I could start seeing stuff other people aren't seeing, you know, like, but that's not for me. So I understand my strengths and also where I don't have any credibility or experience, right? Number one is just a principle to know yourself and to know what things tend to hinder you. And I'll just share one little quick one because I saw it as a big consistent in my clinical practice. One of the biggest things that hinders people in getting in the progress that they want is blaming others. All right. I was right there listening to them. And I'm like, I can see after a while, I could see it coming out. Here it comes. Yeah. You know, if my kids would just.
That bitterness.
Right. If my husband would just, if my wife would just, if my mom would just, you know, like everybody else in their life is making it harder. Right. So they have this story and they're going to live and die by it. Right. And so, but the thing is, it's just a story. And it doesn't mean that it's not true. It doesn't mean that you don't experience more, conflict or curveballs in your life because of your life experience. But listen, like, it's all about perspective. You know, I've been through some crazy stuff in my life. And to be here where I am, like, the number one thing besides that moment of decision is taking responsibility for my life. 100% responsibility. Again, this is one of those things that you don't really do that, you know? And so that's without any wiggle room. I had to stop pointing the fingers. I had to stop blaming and catch myself whenever I do it. And understand, even in a relationship conflict, it's not 50-50, it's 100-100. Because if there's a miscommunication taking place, instead of me being like, why don't you understand this? I can think about, how am I communicating this?
Yeah.
Because there is a way to get through, right? But that's me taking responsibility. But sometimes we don't feel like it, you know? But also, again, if you're physically unwell, it's harder, right? So being able to help people with that piece of like, you've got to take responsibility here. Stop blaming other people. There's a way, right? And what we do is, and this is where I can answer more of the question, is start stacking conditions in your favor to make it easier, make it automatic.
Rule number 9, prioritize quality foods.
There was a study that was conducted, and they found that when folks who were overweight ate close to bedtime, they had a greater secretion of cortisol. All right, so upwards of like over 50% greater cortisol secretion. All of us, by the way, produce a little bit of cortisol when we eat a meal, because it's a big, like, all hands on deck experience. Because again, you're taking stuff from the outside world and putting it in you. Your body got to make sure that you're safe.
It's got to assimilate it. It's got to, check it all, make sure it doesn't throw it up
everything. Like, it's so much that happens. Wow. But if the folks who were overweight in this study, who consumed right before bed, had like over 50% higher secretion of cortisol. And the problem with that is that cortisol is kind of like the antithesis, or like has an inverse relationship with melatonin. So if cortisol is high, melatonin gets
So you're not
tanked.
sleeping well if you're eating right before bed.
Yeah. If you're overweight, obese, there's a higher propensity, and this is why there's some efficacy behind the statement of don't eat before bed. I don't like that statement as a blanket statement across the board. I don't. However, I do like to, looking at the research, it's saying, so just to be a little bit more mindful of that. But the problem is, like, number one, if you want to have something, have something.
Yeah.
It's more stressful trying not to have a snack if you want a snack. But also, part of the reason we might want to have a snack, at 12 o'clock at night is because we're up, Netflix and chilling, you know what I mean?
You should be asleep, buddy, right? You should be asleep.
So that's part of it, is just our practices and our culture around food, and us not getting the nutrition we need. But it's our culture around food. And so it goes back to, like, you need to be sleeping. A sleepy brain is a hungry brain.
Really?
Right? A sleepy brain is a hungry brain.
So if you're tired, you're hungry?
Absolutely. I call it tungry.
You got hangry and tungry.
I think that just happened, yes.
An angry brain is a hungry brain too, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So why is that? Why is a sleepy brain hungry for food?
Oh man, this is so crazy. Listen to this. So there was a study that was conducted, and they found that eating a meal, I'm sorry, let me get a drink. So sorry. Getting a little cotton mouth. Okay. So there was a study that was conducted, and it was crazy in what happens with the brain and your nutrition and glucose reaching the brain when you're sleepy. And so across the board, even though we can use ketones for processes in the brain, we all know this, but there are certain parts of your brain that can only run on glucose. And so what the study found was that when folks were sleep deprived just one night, all right, so one night of total sleep deprivation was used in the study. So that's basically if we stayed up for 24 hours from now until the same time tomorrow. They found that there was a 12% reduction in glucose reaching the brain. All right, so this is literally, your brain is starting to starve. And what happens when that happens, when we go back to that evolutionary perspective, it's danger, right? All hands on deck, cortisol response, adrenaline response. It is a dangerous situation. Yeah. And they found specifically 14% of that carbohydrate reduction or glucose reduction reaching your brain cells was from the prefrontal cortex. So that's the most human part of your brain, responsible for executive function, social control, distinguishing between right and wrong. So your ability to even choose whether or not to eat a food is dramatically reduced because your brain is like starving. And if you've ever had ice cream, if you've ever had cookies, if you've ever had a candy bar, your brain knows, hardwiring, I can get a dense source of glucose to shoot it back to my brain because I need it. Yeah. And so that's when we get into a battle of our biology versus our willpower. your willpower is going to lose out eventually.
It's true.
You know, even for the toughest among us. You know what I'm saying? So, but why stack conditions against yourself? And we do that when we're sleep deprived. And so that's what I want people to know, is that it's not, a lot of times these things aren't necessarily your fault when you're trying to battle it out and not eat a food. It's because our brains are usually, a tired brain is a hungry brain.
And rule number 10, the last one before some very special bonus clips, is reduce the use of devices.
This one is more of the tough love and the most difficult, but this is the most important one in our culture today. And this has to do with our tech, all right? So Harvard researchers have confirmed that blue light exposure from our favorite devices, you know, our iPads, our iPhones, Androids, tablets, televisions, they do in fact suppress your melatonin substantially.
Because your body essentially thinks the sun's out? Is that the problem?
So we have photoreceptors that are always trying to gauge what time it is, right? Because our bodies are wired up to be in sync with nature. But only recently, like literally just the past few decades, have we been able to manipulate and basically create a second daytime, right? So your body's just, it doesn't really know how to figure it out. And so the blue and white spectrum specifically are the ones that are more similar to daylight. And so what it's doing is, and so here's what the researchers found. Basically, every hour you're on your device at night suppresses melatonin for about 30 minutes, right? So if you're on your, you know, you watch a movie, a 3-hour movie, for example, your melatonin is going to be suppressed. Even if you go to bed right after, you're not producing adequate melatonin for about an hour and a half. And so again, you can be unconscious from sheer physical exhaustion, but you're not going to go through your sleep cycles efficiently. And so just be mindful of that. What I encourage people to do is to give yourself a screen curfew, just 30 minutes, all right? I don't want to make this complicated, just 30 minutes. But here's the rub. We are addicted to our devices, like straight up. We just need to be honest. I am, we all are, you know. Basically, it's because of this dopamine loop, right? Dopamine is so powerful, so interesting. Dopamine is one of the things I truly feel has helped to create our civilization as it is, because it drives us to seek, right? Dopamine drives us to seek and to grow and to find, to discover. The internet is perfect for manipulating this, because every time you look for something, you find something, especially social media. You seek, find, seek, find. You produce the dopamine, it drives you to look. But why do you keep going is every time you find something, you get a little bit of a hit from your opioid system. Right? It's like this slow drip, right, of morphine. And so it starts to like feel really good. And to the point where you might be doing your work and like you've got a deadline and you just, you know, like I check Instagram real quick. Before you know it, it's like 30 minutes later and you fall into the internet black hole. Just like, it just pulls you in. So be aware of that. I'm not saying, again, our connection with tech is just gonna grow. So I'm not bashing that. It's just be aware of it. And that when you try to abide by this principle, which will really, really help your sleep quality, to give yourself a screen curfew, you can't just sit there and twiddle your thumbs, because you'll get what I call the internet jitters, right? You'll start getting like a little bit of a withdrawal effect. Like, let me just check one post. What we have to do is this: you have to replace it with something of greater or equal value. It's really that simple. Hopefully, it's what I encourage people to do. This is an opportunity to connect, right? Connect with your significant other, your kids, the people, like physical, like have a real conversation with somebody, right? I know it sounds crazy, but it really works. It's really, really good. You cannot do anything of great success if this is about you. And so my passion is not about learning and being great in this field. It's about helping people and changing that story. Like, I want to make sure that, I mean, it breaks my heart.
Look at you. You just changed right there. Just changed you. You're good. Keep going.
Ed, when I think about these kids, you know, who are in cancer treatment centers right now, you know, and how things can be better, and our system is broken, you know. We've got some amazing physicians, and many of them are my friends, you know. And now they're shifting more to integrative medicine, functional medicine, because the way that we've taught historically, you know, in conventional medicine in the last few decades, we're terrible at chronic illness. Everything has gone up. How? If we're so smart and good at what we do, you know. And the truth is, if you take a really smart person, which these are the best of the best, and you teach them the wrong thing, they become world-class at doing the wrong thing. And so that's what really drives me, man,
I could see it all over your face. Actually, it's coming down your face. Yeah.
Is doing whatever we can do to help to facilitate the next generation. And I know that so many of our problems in society, with violence, with just this big dichotomy that we're experiencing right now, has to do with people don't do well because they don't feel well.
Yeah.
And so instead of me getting out and protesting, that's not my path. My path is how can I get people healthier so we can have great conversations, so we can meet each other and have more compassion. It's very difficult to have compassion when you're sleep deprived. It's very difficult to have compassion when you're dying inside because your body's experiencing, a chronic illness. All of those things drive me to be the best possible. And so I was not expecting. I was not expecting to say that.
Because you made it this far in a video, I want to celebrate you. Most people start and don't finish. Most people never actually follow through. Most people say they want something, but they don't ever do the work to actually get it. But you are different. You are special. Believe Nation, you made it here all the way to the end, and I love you. So as a special celebration, if you put a hashtag believe down in the comments below on this video, I will showcase you and celebrate you somewhere on the screen in a future video because you are awesome. For 10 more amazing rules from Tom Bilyeu, check the video right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.
Morning routines are one of the most important things that you can create in your life. And the reason is when you start the day, if you get early momentum going, the rest of the day is often going to follow in that. It's an idea called entropy.